Hello, my name is Brant. My last name is Hunt. Today is the third day of May 2022. And what I wanted to do is share some information that is, what is a relationship? And what I'm primarily talking about is a relationship between a man and a woman, and how we've been mixed up in my days and even before me, to do with simply is how we've gotten mixed up with a relationship, and how men and women now are actually at war with one another, which is actually what those who try to continue to program us in order to be like that, and how sex has been put up at the very highest pinnacle thing at the top. And I'll give you an illustration of that. We seem to be caught up in this enormous Hollywood glitz of having sex with someone. I'm not against sex. That's not the point here. We've just simply majoring in the minors and forgotten that love is far more important than actually sex. Sex is basically a attribute that expresses love to someone else in a environment that basically is trust with one another. So I wanted to share this with you. As I said, that we seem to don't understand it. I look at it as like a Sunday ice cream deal. Is that there's a banana there, there's ice cream there, there's even cream, and the very top is the cherry on top. And somehow we have majored on this whole cherry as being the most important thing about everything. And I wanted to basically share with you the American Dictionary of English Language, the 1828 edition that Noah Webster did. This guy had to be a super brilliant guy, another, chemical person in our lives, and we take it for granted that this guy actually did many words here and shared definitions about that. So why do we pay attention to those in Hollywood that actually, in reality, if you look at the relationships with them being married, husband and wife, with actors, their relationships, you see that basically almost all of them actually are failures. The whole statistics with them is they're far worse, even as Hollywood stars, than the American people. Why is that? I think it simply is that they're naive. They are incredibly naive, and also simply is they don't have the ability or desire to love someone, to others. That is, they are actually caught up in that as almost as though it's a fairy tale. There's nothing wrong with a fairy tale, but this whole idea is a dream world. And I don't mean it, and again, bad words such and such of that. But what I'm saying simply is that we have forgotten how to love one another. In fact, we've forgotten how to love our own selves. And I think that's the pivotal part here, is that we don't love ourselves. And so we look for someone outside of ourselves, and though we're going to be complete. And I don't think that's the way it works. It works the opposite. You must be a complete person himself. You must be, in a way, being an asset to the other person instead of being a dependence upon someone to make you feel better, or whatever you're looking for, or a confidence, or saying the right words, or doing the right things, and hugging one another, which friends can always hug one another. And so what is taking place is that we actually put these things on a pedestal, and they're not true, you see. So I wanted to share this thing with what Webster says, what a relationship is, and also what is sex itself. And I'm not poo-pooing the whole idea of having a man and woman being together. That's not the point here. It never has been. But obviously, we've got a problem here, as someone would say in mission control, with how we relate to one another. And I think the attitudes I just said is simply is that we're looking for someone to complete ourselves. And reality is simply is we are already whole, but we don't know it. We see ourselves as separate. We see ourselves as being insufficient. We see ourselves as being inferior. There are others that actually feel themselves as are superior. And what is a relationship, so to speak, and what is sex? You see, the word sex today, when I grew up in the 60s and 70s, the word sex had nothing to do about getting in bed and having sex and making love. The whole idea was simply is what sex are you? Are you a male or a female? And in this day, that's not politically correct. But I'm sorry, folks. It's only two. It's only two. And that doesn't fit in the whole belief system today. But again, we're living in reality here, folks. We're not living in a fairy tale, you see. So this is what Webster says what a relationship is, okay? And he would use the word also. He would say simply, is at first, I'm going to describe the word simply relationship. It's a very short meaning here. Having relation or kindred. We might be tempted to take these two nations for, sorry, I read the wrong one. Sorry, that's my mistake. No, its relationship is a noun, the state of being related by kindred, affinity, or other alliances. And that's it. That's what he says about it, relationship. Now let's go to the root word being relations, relation. The act of telling, recital, account, narration, narrative of facts, as a historical relation. So that's not what it's talking about. So respect, reference, regard. I have been importuned to make some observations on this art in relation to agreement with poetry. So that's not what it is. Connecting between things, meaning mutual respect of what one thing is with regard to another, as a relation of a citizen to the state, the relation of a subject to the supreme authority, the relationship or relation of husband and wife, or a master and servant, the relation of a state of probation to a state of retribution. So I'm not going to go any further because he's basically, this last one here is actually connecting the whole idea of husband and wife. So he doesn't go in a whole lot. Now there has to be there has to be what I call a stable ground. There must be the same somewhat likes, but yet there must be somewhat dislikes in certain things. That makes the whole thing turn, so to speak. So there's a mutual admiration for both sides. So there's for a man to see a woman and see her beauty, and but yet all her attributes in some ways simply is that how she holds herself, how she is she honest in her way she carries herself, is she someone who backbites? In other words, a characteristic of some people is to backbite their own husbands, or the same way a husband backbiting his wife. Is he supporting her in all ways of building her up? In other words, does he see her with some of her flaws, but yet he's willing to see these and yet hopefully to see how to build something here to work together instead of actually fighting with one another. And that's key for the other side is verse, because husbands don't always do this. Husbands tend to be more logically minded, and women tend to be what I would call, or wives tend to be what I would call simply, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a good word. It's not logical. They seem to be what I would call in tune to what's going on, or being present in the whole situation, if they're in that category, so to speak. So what is taking place here is that you're relating. So you have a common ground. You know, if you like art, or you like poetry, or you like to go travel, those are basic things. And being a friend, but there's something else greater than that, saying simply you want to spend your whole life with someone of that nature. And that changes everything. The problem is simply is that we step what I would call in the wrong way. We are always looking for someone to complete us, and that doesn't work, because what happens is you begin to lean upon that other person immensely, to the point simply is you suffocate them. Do you follow what I'm saying? Or the other person is dependent upon someone. And so I know relationships like husband and wife, they fell in love with each other apparently, let's say 35 years ago, such and such, and everything's grand and everything. But as they've gotten older, one is actually in some ways has grown in certain areas and become more mature, and the other one has not done anything, it's stagnated, hasn't moved in the area, maybe saying spiritual interests. And then the other person is what we call financially, it's not this as much as it used to be, but financially dependent on the other. And that's the only reason why they're together, which is not a good reason at all to be together. And in fact, the other side, such and so, this is why certain things happen in divorces. And I don't see anything wrong with divorces. The problem is divorces themselves create what I call this whole marriage deal, which doesn't need to be blessed by the church and doesn't need to be blessed by the state. It needs to be your common law between you and your spouse, and what your agreements are and what you want out of life. For example, do you want where you want to live at? What is your dream? How many kids do you want? Boy, girl, da da da. But those are basic things. What about deeper things? You see, are you interested in looking at deeper issues in life? You see, and at one time in my lifetime, as me being 62 years old, the whole idea was simply the man was the one who went out and got a job and worked for 40 hours or whatever and provided the bread and butter and all that type of thing. And the woman's responsibility was to, quote unquote, to take care of the kids, provide for them, provide the kids with love and nurture. And those things. But those things are no longer that way. Is what we live in today is not a solid foundation. Again, I'm not saying what I would say that simply a man should go out and, quote unquote, work all his life, such and such, because there's an attitude simply is, are they growing together, working together, or are they growing apart? So the basis simply of love simply is that you would share with your spouse that you have an issue with certain things, and you say, well, something's bothering me. What's going on with you? And you're hopefully able to them sharing their heart and how they feel. The key is simply is the one who's asking wants to know in a way to hopefully build a solidified relationship and being closer and bonded together more, if the other party is willing to do that. If not, you've got a problem. Or the person who asked these questions, such and such, is belligerent. In other words, he or she is finding faults in such and such. And that's not going to work, folks. It just won't. You're actually in some ways like a termite, and you got a foundation of wood here. And what's happening simply is you're destroying the relationship by the trust factor. There shouldn't be what I would call any lies going on between the partners. If you're lying already before you're married to the person you're planning to marry, you really don't have any, you really actually shouldn't be married. You shouldn't even be together, because you're not ready. Because you're afraid of what the other person might think of you or say to you. And if that's it, then you're going to have some issues with that. Am I a marriage counselor? No way. I've never been married. To me, singlehood is a enormously a great thing to do. I can do whatever I want to do. I don't have to get up at certain times. I'm not under anyone's lordship or authority, such and such, as Mr. Webster speaks about. So And so I'm going to explain one other thing here. And this is the whole idea of this is the definition of a word called sex. You see, it has two things it shares here. And let's see if we can go through it here. The distinction between male and female, or that property or character by which an animal is male or female. The male sex is usually characterized by muscular strength. That's why men are the ones who go out and do work, so to speak. Okay. Now this is based upon 1828, so this is almost 200 years old. Okay. Boldness and firmness is what is also characteristics of a man. He takes the lead, he picks up the ball, and he runs with it. He gives. He's characteristic at basically taking a lead and picking up the football and moving it, and seeking a goal. The female sex is characterized by softness, sensibility, and modesty. So those are great attributes for a female, because simply is she's going to have children. And men are not characteristics good at basically loving children. I'm not saying they don't know how to love children, but men are not what we call, they struggle with what we would call simply is being able to forgive, to be able to see the beauty in the child as it is, and they don't have what we call patience. Most men are, let's get it done and over with type of thing, okay? Because we're geared in a way, there's a job, let's get it over with. This is why men think this way, and I've had the same thing in my own life. When a woman shares something and she's devastated, she's frustrated, and she's discouraged about something, and the man says, okay, let's fix it. And the woman's like, I don't want it. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for you to fix it. I'm looking for you basically to just hear me out. Just let me tell you how I feel. And men are in this other deal as though they're chemists or at work, and they're putting a house here, and somehow the angles of the wood it's not the right strength. It's not right strength. It's not the right length. And so, okay, we need to fix it. So we need to cut this piece off so to meet 3.6 feet long. Okay, or da 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 da. You see, so that's how men think, and women need to understand that, as well as men understanding that the women want to share their feelings. And there's nothing wrong with either one. That's just characteristics of a man and a woman. Don't try to change people. That's not the whole idea neither. That's not what you're about also in that relationship in a marriage. You're not there to change him to be like you. That's not what it is. You are there to mesh and work together as what we would call a meshing with gears, as a mesh. And in order that happen, they have to mesh in order for it to progress. If they don't mesh, then what happens simply, it doesn't complete itself. It never comes to complete. Look at machinery and how it works with gears and how it fits together. And if they don't mesh together, then the work, whatever is taking place, will not be complete. They must work together in order to mesh to produce something. And a lot of times simply that's what children, you see. Let me continue here as he goes with this. He goes on to say, with sex in botany, the property of plants which corresponds to sex in animals. In other words, it's formed on the doctrine of sexes in plants, you see. And then he goes one more further. He says, by way of emphasis, womankind, females. And then he goes into this, it says this is from two quotes from authors in here. This is from Dryden, Dryden, and this is his quote. It says, unhappy sex, exclamation marks, whose beauty is your snare. Interesting. Let's go a little deeper there. What is he saying? This is a snare. The whole idea here is that men are what we call attracted to women by their looks. That's what catches most men's eye. That's the main thing. Then later on, there are other deeper things. But at first, it's her looks. And women are seduced or fooled, as I would say, by a snare because they get this attention and they think it's love. But her beauty and her charm, her beauty won't last forever, you see. And her charm is the same way. She's this way, such and such, but you don't know what she's like emotionally when the wheels come off, so to speak. And again, this is not to put down women or men. This is not the whole deal here. I'm just giving you an illustration from what Webster is sharing, and I think it's important. Okay, so let's go on. Here's a quote from Cooper. His name is spelled Cowper. It says, "This sex, basically a comma, who present civilizes ours." So it's a mutual thing here is what, and I think this is from William Cooper, who is a Cowper because he has an unusual spelling of his name. And so what's corresponding here with that name is simply is William Cooper wrote hymns in the church back in the 1700s. You see. So there has to be what I would call a mutual responsibility, respect for one another. In other words, there's role playing here. There's roles that a woman does, and there's roles that a man does. In order, for example, here's an illustration. You get together, both you and your wife get together, both spouses, and you need a refrigerator or something to do with the house, and you need it to be repaired. So you need to get input from both sides. And usually the man eventually makes that decision because he is supposed to take responsibility if it goes right or if it goes wrong. Now, that's not taught as much. And there are men who, quote unquote, rely on their other spouse, their mate, to make those decisions. But what I'm saying simply is what he is saying here is that most men is known for their strength, their boldness, and their firmness. So in other words, their boldness means simply is to take off and be a trailblazer and make something out of nothing or work together in getting to a goal. Okay? Firmness means simply is that they're not swayed by emotions, so to speak. We still have the goal. We're still going to pursue it. And even though we are struggling now, the goal is still intact here. Okay, we're pursuing it. We're not going to suddenly ditch ourselves out of the water here and say, nope, we're not going to be involved here. Because there's a goal here that both have agreed that this is what we want. For example, let's just say for children. And this could give you an example of what took place with my parents. My parents felt that simply public education was going to be a problem. And so in the early 70s, my parents chose to take me out of the public school system and put me in a private school, me and my brother. Okay. And so with that happening, that was their goal, to give us a better education. Now, the problem for me and my brother was simply, he saw it quicker than I did, is religious connotation because it was a Christian school. I bought into it. My brother eventually rebelled against it. He saw it for what it was. And so that was their decision. It's done and gone. I don't blame my parents for anything of that nature. They did what they thought was best, and that's fine. That's what their belief system was. That was their whole underlying thing. They believed that God and Jesus was their savior. All these things that they felt were important, and that's fine. But once we eventually leave the house, the home, then we choose to do whatever we want to do. You see, to pursue these things, whatever our goals are, and to say, wait a minute, who is God? Why are we doing these certain things? Why do we go to church? What is the purpose of church? Such and such. And that's just what me and my brother did. Okay. It could be other issues. The other thing simply is in your relationship, I think is critical. I think it's important. Do you want truth in the relationship? In other words, are you interested in being honest with one another to the point simply is that it's the most important characteristics that actually bonds you together, that keeps you together, that you're going to be honest and truthful about who you are, your fears, your disappointments, your hopes, and not to the other partner understanding that and simply saying, okay, not to cast a stone at the person if he fails. After all, you're working together here, folks. You're working together. So the whole idea simply is a mutual relationship that you're going to mesh together and you're going to work together for a goal. One of those goals, simply like I said, was to do with the children. How many kids you want, such and such. But truth has got to be the most important thing about what we call honesty. And what characteristics are there? Well, does he have character? Does she have character? Is she dependable or is he dependable? If you choose to have kids, this is the strain upon a marriage in a lot of ways. Then you realize maybe your ground wasn't so quote unquote a firm foundation. Maybe it's built on something else that will actually sink, you see. And as what usually happens simply in a family a lot of times is when kids come along, I'm not saying always, I'm just saying simply as an illustration, the point out simply is that with this, the kids, certain things now are more important and the focus is no longer always on the other spouse. Now it's actually on the kids to make sure they are taken care of and that they are loved and that we show kindness to them and give them direction in life. Okay, that's just simply like that. And most people are not there. Okay, they're just not. And it would be best that you, if you're not wanting to do this, you're not prepared for it, the best thing to do is you stay out of it. You don't get involved in a relationship in marriage if that's not what you want. And if you don't want it, because if you don't want it, then it's not gonna work out. Okay, it's as simple as that. You're just asking for a quagmire. You're asking for trouble. So there has to be that thing. One of the things that I think is so beautiful about what I listened to Crow, CRROW 777, and there was a show that he did, a hour program that was done. I think it was on Sunday or Saturday, and it was dealing with what we call having a child at home. No longer having a child in the hospital system. Both parents, what I understand is somewhere in the South, these are Southerners, I could tell by their accent that they're from the South, and they found someone, that this was her third child, and I thought it was interesting that they had the other two, and they realized it simply is that it was a trauma center that goes on in a hospital. And they give illustrations of what's going on when the mother is having a child. So they chose this third thing. Says she was going through all these things and she put herself under the authority of the doctors. This is another thing, folks, for women who are having children. You know your body, you know what's going on, so to speak, if you're aware. Again, that word awareness is key. Are you listening to your body and what's going on when you have that child with you? You see, and a lot of women have lost this intuition of what's going on. Most of it has simply been, oh, the doctor will take care of it, you see. Well, she explained simply is that, but dealing with the doctor, he was basically going to come to the point of doing what we call pushing his own way around. And this was like, probably halfway through, maybe even less than halfway through. And she made a decision, cut it, move on. We're not going to do this. And the husband agreed. Okay. Because they had already had issues already with the second child that they basically were given vaccines. Also, not only vaccines, simply as the child and the mother came home, both were sick after being born. They also they cut the umbilical cord, which is important. It has nutrients there for the child until it withers up. Instead, it's the clamp position, cut it, and that's it. That's just what they do. They're almost like machines, doctors are. They do things. They program things to simply your head. This is the way you do it. In fact, they don't even see what they're doing most of the time. It's usually on their timetable. So they explain how chaos is going on during the whole thing of having the child. So what happened was this particular lady, which you would call a midwife, this was like I think she said it was about 45 minutes before she had the child. And there was a sense of panic on both sides because, both sides are, no doctors here, such and such. She showed up. The feeling was completely, they said that it was like she was in control. She knew what she was doing. She understood where she was at. She brought what he said and she said, brought calmness into the room. And this lady apparently, is what I understand, a midwife is actually, I think, has had over 1,000 babies, if not more, she's actually done. So this is a relief on both sides. And they had the baby in water in a pool that was probably just big enough for them to, and the baby. And so what is happening here is the whole eye-to-eye contact with the baby. There's no towel put on their face and the stuff put in their eyes. None of that's done to them. They are there together. They're there. They're bonded together. Both are in the presence. They're both in the presence of that child being born. And the midwife knew what to do. The whole point, they're interviewed by them, and it brings stability in both them. And there's a calm, again, like I said earlier when she came there, but there's even more of a calm and relaxation. You know what happened here? This is wow. So the mother-to-be who has this, so what? Tell me when I'm supposed to breathe and push such and such. And the midwife says, you'll know, you push when you know. So there's not an exercise here, every 20 seconds you push. No, it's when you feel like it. So do you understand what's taking place here? The mother-to-be is in tune with her body and her child. She's aware of what's going on, and she does what she's supposed to do because it's intuitive to do these things. She's not laying down in a bed, which is oxymoron. Doesn't make any sense. How do you push a child out that way? You see, all these things just don't have any common sense in it, folks. The procedures are actually far worse in a hospital than they are at home. The other thing simply is there's the eye-to-eye contact, which I've said, with mom. She's not under drugs. She's there. She's there. She's there eye-to-eye with that child. And so is the father there also. What a beautiful concept. We used to do this over 150 years ago. Everybody did this. Well, the doctor came later on, but usually there's a midwife or there was family there, especially women who have already had children. So they had expertise also themselves. And what happened after she had the child, she said this is amazing. She says, I'm going to get up and I'm going to have a shower. Now, hello, I'm sorry. That is beyond unbelievably that she feels well enough that she has energy to get up and go and shower herself in a bathtub. Do you know anybody that does that? Have you met anybody who is actually, this whole procedure took place, and this is like a third child. Now, don't get me wrong. The whole idea sometimes with the first child is what you call a little bit more, because most are not tested. But again, the mother-to-be here, she is listening to her body, intuitive to actually push when she feels like it. Not when someone else is telling her to do it, like, okay, wait a minute, hold it, looking at a clock here. No, it doesn't work that way, folks. That's not the way nature works. Nature is not built on a clock, folks. Time is a fiction, too. It's a fiction. And that's how they seduce us, too, in a way, time and fear. But again, she gets up, lays the child on the husband. He's laying down in bed, lays the child on his chest, and there's still eye contact. He missed there. There's presence there, folks. Not someone putting a blanket over you. Oh yes, that's right. We got to. Oh, if it's a boy, excuse me. Do we circumcise the child? No, we don't circumcise the child. Why would we? The child is perfect. The child is perfect. There's nothing wrong with the boy. Never has been. Why would you need to circumcise a boy? Why would you traumatize that child? That pain that goes through a boy when someone messes with their penis. And hear me out. There's no mom or dad in the room. Talk about isolated and unloved. Boys go through this, especially here in America. Why am I so adamant about it? Because it's wrong. Why would this, if we quote unquote believe in God, why would he make something imperfect? That you have to do something. It's a lie. And the child is actually clamped down and has no way except begging for mercy and crying. And eventually, a lot of times, the child just simply blacks out. Now, think about this, guys. Think about this. This is so critical for the younger generation to see and understand. What are you doing? What are you doing having in a child in a hospital for? It's asinine. They create trauma there. These people are not even present there. It's just a machine working. There's 3 or 4 people working together as machines, such and such, like robots. They're not present. They're not in the moment. How can they? They've been taught all this stuff. And you wonder why men have issues. Maybe it's because simply they have issues. Simply, why did my mom do this to me? Why? Where are you? What are you doing? Why aren't you here? But he's in isolation, he's in pain, and he's in agony. And they don't even give any what they call drugs or whatever to help that, which I'm against those. But that'll give you the idea of how much pain that boy is going through. And I'm not saying they don't do it with women either, the baby girls. I'm not saying, but here in America, that is gone. That's hardly ever done anymore with women or little girls. But it's still done with boys. Why is it so important to do that to boys? Why? So you need to understand, as I'm older, and it's important for you to understand simply as young people today, that you're being lied to about everything on this planet. Everything. Lawyers, doctors, preachers, teachers. Many think they're doing good, but they're not. They're lying to you. They may not know that, but they're causing trauma for you. In reality, simply is, this is why sometimes their relationship with a husband and wife have issues, because of these whole things that have happened a long time ago with a man. And why a man is unable to be present in the whole act of making love and with his woman in bed. Think about that. And you, as women, as mothers, you have that power because most men are completely unaware of what's supposed to happen in a hospital, period, and especially in delivering a baby. But you're the authority. And you can choose whatever you want to have your child, if it's in a barn or out in the woods or whatever, in a house, whatever. It's your child. It's not the state or the hospital's job. It's not theirs. You've been fooled. You've given over your power to them, and they become the authority instead of you and your husband, or father and dad and mom and wife. So, and they're most, I don't know what the percentage is now. In the 60s and 70s, it was higher. They would do it because of religious perspectives. Oh, there was a quote from my parents, not knowing better. Well, they circumcised their children, such and such in the Bible. Well, circumcision had nothing to do with the physical aspect. In fact, let's just see what that word means, okay? Let's just see what that word means, circumcision. Let's see. This is again from the 1828. I don't even know what this is, so it's going to be kind of wild if I mess up here. But I'm just kind of simply what does circumcision mean? Circumcision to me in a spiritual realm is to be closer, set apart, so to speak. But I could be wrong, okay? Let me see here. Let's see what it says. Let's look in here. Well, he's very pointed. It's just, I'll tell you what it says. It's not even, all right. This is a noun, circumcision, the act of cutting off the prepuce, I'll spell that for you, prepuce, or foreskin. That's all he says, okay, as a noun. He does go, let's go to the base word of circumcise. This means to cut off the prepuce or foreskin of males, a ceremony or rite in the Jewish and the Mohammedan religions. So it's based upon the Jewish religions and the Arab world with the Islam faith. It goes on, the word is applied also to a practice among some nations of performing a like operation upon females. So it has been, at this point in 1828, it was other countries that actually were doing it also. Okay, in 1828. Again, the book I'm giving you the information from is a huge book. That's where I'm giving you the information from this particular giant dictionary. This dictionary is hopefully will help me see a lot of things and how the English language, in a lot of ways, is spells, and we have no idea what meanings are in words anymore, only what we've been taught in school. So I wanted to share this with you because it comes from my heart. I want good relationships with people as a husband and wife. I want those relationships to be based upon a friendship first among, because in friends, we can always be friends in a relationship. We may not always be lovers in a relationship. And how the church and state itself has taken away what we would call that right, that right is based upon you and your partner, your wife or your husband, instead of giving it to the state or to the church. It's time for us to wake up. I'm sorry, it's time for us to be aware. I don't want to say awake because I just said something awake. Something means you're being dead. I don't want people to be dead. But the characteristic simply is that, does the man and woman have truth in them? Do they honor one another? And do they want the same things? And that's just a basic thing. But are they also interested in spiritual issues? Are they willing to look into other things out there, in alchemy, astrology, or to Rudolf Steiner, or to even Manny P. Hall, such and such? There's the boogaloo's of this spiritual. If we chunk what I call religion, and let's go look at that word, actually, since we just said that, Be interesting to see what he says, what religion means. So let me see here. Just pardon me for a minute here. Okay, here we go. I'll read what he says here. It's interesting what religion means. He's got a lengthy deal here. So let's read it, and then we'll cease the broadcast here, okay? Religion, in its most comprehensive sense, includes a belief in the being or perfections of God, in the revelation of his will to man, in man's obligation to obey his commands, in a state or reward and punishment, and in man's accountability to God, and also true godliness or piety of life, with the practice of all moral duties. It therefore comprehends theology as a system of doctrines or principles, as well as practical piety. For the practice of moral duties without a belief in a divine lawgiver, and without reference to his will or commands is not religion. So it's based upon a God, a belief system. Let's go one more thing here. But he goes back here, and I missed this part. Religion. This word seems originally to have signified a oath or vow to the gods, or the obligation of such an oath or view, which was held very sacred by the Romans. Okay, and that's what we call regladi, if I can say that correctly. And he also says here to bind anew. So that's part of what religion is to bind. He goes on here, says religion as distinct from theology is godliness or real piety and practice consisting in the performance of all known duties to God and our fellow man in obedience to divine command or from love to God and his law. He says on here, this is from Buckmaster, a quote from him. He says, religion will attend you as a pleasant and useful companion in every proper place and every temporal occupation of life. Let's go on here. Religion, as distinct from virtue or moral reality, consists in the performance of the duties we owe directly to God from a principle of obedience to his will. Hence, we often speak of religion and virtue as different branches of one system, or the duties of the first and the second tables of the law. This is a quote from Washington. Let us with caution indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion. Let me say that again. Let us with caution indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion. I assume that's from George Washington. Don't know. Fourth one, any system of faith and worship. In this sense, religion comprehends the belief and worship of pagans, Mohammedanism, which he's talking about Islam, as well as of Christians. Any religion consisting in the belief of a superior power or power governing the world, and in the worship of such power or powers. Thus we speak of the religion of the Turks, or the Hindus, or the Indians, as well as others such as the Christian religion. We speak of false religion as well as true religion. And he gives a quote here from Milton. The rites, R-I-T-E-S, of religion in the plural. Now, I find it interesting that he says here, this is really critical, that this is what Webster describes. Noah Webster, this is amazing. This is kind of a red flag. So let's look at it. So let me go back to 4. It says, in the sense, religion comprehends the belief and worship of pagans, which is not capitalized, and Mohammedanism is capitalized, as well as of Christians, and it's not capitalized. Now that's wild, isn't it? So Noah Webster gives emphasis on the capital letter of Mohammedanism, doesn't do it with pagans, and doesn't do it with Christians. So that may explain they believed in a deity. So he didn't. This is what we're seeing here. Webster is saying simply is that he doesn't believe what Christians are saying their belief system too. He's saying they're there. He's saying the same thing with the pagans, but he gives a extra, he's putting it on a pedestal with Mohammedanism. I find that really strange here um, when he shared this. And this is actually, again, this is on the word religion. Um, and I will conclude, since that's what I promised, and this is becoming a longer video than I thought it would be. If you have questions, I would try to answer your questions. My parents eventually did divorce, and rightfully so, because my dad was no longer faithful to my mom. And that's the right reason to actually have a divorce. And I'm not putting I'm not putting either side on a pedestal. I'm just saying that's what happened to my parents. See. Okay. Thank you for listening, and you have a great evening. And thank you again for your attention. Take care. And I appreciate you, Cosmarius Barakowski, for giving you have been very busy today. Well, it's just simply it's just inspiration. Suddenly I said, let's do it. Thank you. Take care. You have a good evening.